Hey, everybody. It is Friday, March 7th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And we are here with your reminder, your semi-annual reminder, that you need to push the clocks forward tomorrow night. If you still have clocks. I mean, most of them are automatic, right? Your phone and laptop. But for those of you still with clocks, the microwave is always super annoying, Rachel.
I mean, the typical late night joke for anybody who is still watching late night is like, okay, my microwave is the correct time again. I mean, that's basically how it goes. So yeah, the microwave, a few other things. Other than that, everything goes automatically now. Including
an hour of sleep on Saturday night. That goes away automatically too.
It does, which is why I'm just going to go to bed early.
Early bedtime for Jill Saturday night. Beyond that, Jill, I should mention I'm still here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I neglected to mention on yesterday's podcast, but I took my first ever Waymo, the self-driving cars. Scottsdale and Phoenix area is one of the areas in the country where they have them as self-driving cabs, basically, like no driver, driverless cabs. You order the Waymo app like you would order an Uber, but then the Waymo shows up. Your initials are on the top of the car. There is no driver. You get in the back seat, or you can get in the front seat, and then it just goes.
And okay, so you're here. You live to tell. How was it?
I live to tell the story. I actually went live. I went live for it. So on Instagram, you can see my half an hour. I actually answered people's questions about the news while I took my first Waymo ride, because I was like, well, there's no one keeping me company in the car, so at least you guys can keep me company virtually. And if something happens, you can contact authorities. So I had several.
Technically, I am in this car with hundreds of people in it.
Yeah. It was 12 or 1,300 people tracking, watching the live. And I'm like, if something happens, please call Scottsdale Police. And it honestly, after a few minutes, it didn't feel any different from any other ride I've taken before. I've certainly had worse human rides, both the smell of the car, braking. Waymo gave me a pretty smooth ride.
Is there a wheel? And is it moving? Wheel. There's just nobody.
Correct.
There's just no driver.
The driver is either invisible or non-existent, Jill.
Moshe, the future is here.
Honestly, people down here swear by it. Some people prefer it to Uber. And I will say this, numbers-wise, we're actually probably, our future is safer with driverless cars because they don't drink, they don't get distracted by cell phones, they don't get distracted by their own emotions or angry or, want to cut someone off. They don't get distracted by noise in the car. They don't get distracted by the air conditioning and the radio and whatnot. So I think that, I'm open-minded about this driverless future, at least based on my first Waymo ride. And fun fact, who's a big group against driverless cars? The trial lawyers. Why, you should ask? Well, who makes a lot of money off of car accidents, the tens of thousands of them, the hundreds of thousands of them that we have every year? Trial lawyers. So their lobby has actually been one of the groups at the state and national level that's been fighting against driverless cars. Always track the money, Jill.
I did see you answering questions on Instagram Live, but I just didn't realize that you were I thought you were just in a regular taxi.
You thought I was in a car with a human driving
it, and had a little bit of extra time.
Nope, robot.
You're so ahead of your time, Moshe.
I'm actually 5 years behind based on what the people locally here tell me, but I'm getting on board.
It's no, Jill, you're just
you're just even further behind me.
Way behind.
Yes.
All right, let's get to some headlines here. Tariff Whiplash sparks a sell-off on Wall Street. On again, off again, on again, off again.
Somewhat.
Kind of.
For a month.
Meanwhile, are all of those tariffs actually helping to curb the fentanyl crisis in the United States? As promised, the Trump administration's getting closer to dismantling the Department of Education. So what does that actually mean? All right, remember the big ruckus at the president's speech before a joint session of Congress? Well, now the House has censured Democratic Representative Al Green for disrupting the address.
And he had his own unique reply to it yesterday.
Some new polling is out, and it shows a huge shift in Americans' feelings towards Israelis, particularly amongst Democrats. Moshe, remember those two astronauts who went up to space for about what they thought was going to be a few days in that Boeing spacecraft? Well, they're still there, And they say that they want to stay out of politics.
Yeah, 10 weeks has turned into about 10 months, and there's a lot of people talking about them, and we'll tell you what they had to say.
Women's pro tennis introducing paid maternity leave. We'll tell you who's paying for it and how daylight saving time affects your health.
The bad
I don't
news.
think this is a huge surprise.
No, I think we've done this one before, but it's a good reminder.
And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating.
I got some good recommendations for anyone who's traveling to Scottsdale, Arizona anytime soon.
Okay, let's start with the latest on the trade wars. And Moshe, it does feel like we're watching a tennis match. On again, off again.
What's the tennis word? Fault? Fault. Or maybe the better word is break point. Like I'm at my breaking point trying to keep track of all the tariff news.
So 2 days after issuing new tariffs, President Trump on Thursday imposed his latest 1-month delay on tariffs, specifically giving a reprieve to any Mexican and Canadian products that are covered by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, otherwise known as USMCA. That is the free trade treaty that Trump negotiated during his first term, and it covers about 50% of the $505 billion in goods that Mexico ships to the United States every year. It also covers about 40% of the $412 billion in goods that Canada sends our way. So this reprieve is meant to ensure that prices remain relatively steady for certain goods, especially grocery store staples. However, tariffs will still go into effect for about half of the products sent our way from each neighboring country. This is now the second time he has put a 30-day delay in place. He first announced his plans to tariff Canada and Mexico in January. And Moshe, we have talked about how President Trump tends to watch the stock market, which has been in a bit of a free fall since those tariffs were announced. But on Thursday, he said, nope, not on my radar. His exact quote, I am not even looking at the market because long term, the United States will be very strong with what is happening here. On Thursday, the NASDAQ, which is where the big tech names all trade, well, that closed more than 10% below its recent high, which technically puts it in what is called correction territory. So if it's not the markets, as he says, what is going on?
Well, someone on Wall Street had hope that Trump, who is seen as business-friendly, who campaigned as business-friendly, had most of Wall Street backing him this election, would consider the stock market as something of an approval rating. And we've talked about this before. It's super important to him. If you look at tweets, he's got dozens of tweets talking about taking credit for the stock market. Anytime the stock market is down, he blames his predecessor or something else. Nonetheless, his positions in recent days have sparked a sell-off here. We've told you about it. His Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who also comes from Wall Street, is worth several $100 million, said that Trump's focus is broader than the daily moves of the stock market. He was on CNBC, which tracks all of that, saying that the White House is not looking at 1% moves up and down here, saying yesterday morning, though, that the tariffs have been successful in moving the Mexicans and the Canadian government towards the positions the president is looking for. And so they're trying to give them some breathing room. So it began with automakers yesterday, and now it's expanded to all the goods, about half the goods from Mexico and half the goods from Canada that fall under our free trade agreement. But at the same time, they say the tariffs are going to be back next month. So we're going to play this game all over again around April 2nd. The Trump administration saying the tariffs go back up for everything to 25% on April 2nd. That's when they also say they'll do reciprocal tariffs, so tariffs beyond those tariffs due to the tariffs that the Mexicans and the Canadians have now counter-launched against us. That is, unless they say that the Mexicans and Canadians make, quote, substantial progress addressing fentanyl trafficking. Now, the Canadians say 1% of your fentanyl comes from Canada. The amount of fentanyl a year from Canada is what you get a day in Mexico. They've been looking for metrics, specifics, like what do you need to do? What do you need us to do to end this whole thing? And they've been a bit frustrated, the Canadians and the Mexicans, about the lack of specific answers from the White House. And the feeling from some Canadian officials I spoke to is that the numbers keep changing, that every time they visit Washington or every time they make a phone call, suddenly they have to do something else, or the number changes. And so it's been frustrating to them. But for the president, this is a key tool of leverage to get not just Canada and Mexico, but all countries around the world to not only change their trade policies, but engage in a number of changes that he thinks will benefit America.
Even the New York Times, Moshe, never friendly to Donald Trump, has some new reporting from inside Mexico that the Mexican government has really cracked down on the Sinaloa cartel. They say there have been a barrage of arrests, drug seizures, and lab busts in recent months. The paper is also reporting that the country's law enforcement seized nearly as much fentanyl in the last 5 months as it did in the previous year. Mexican President Sheinbaum says there have been nearly 900 arrests in Sinaloa alone since October. It has reportedly led cartel leaders to scale back fentanyl production and go into hiding.
Yeah, at the White House, they're very happy about this because this was their goal here, to get the Mexicans to become much more aggressive in combating the cartels. If you remember, we've told you that the previous strategy from the previous Mexican president, Obrador, was a policy he called hugs, not bullets. It was a strategy Obrador had focused on the root causes of crime, generally avoiding violent confrontations with the cartels. But now Trump has come in there. The tariffs we told you about. Also threats to militarily invade Mexico, which Mexicans have not taken kindly to, but the U.S. has said, listen, we have now deemed some of these cartels on par with terror groups around the world. And so that has actually led a number of these cartels to go into hiding here, to cut production in certain facilities. They're genuinely scared of military strikes inside Mexico. And so they have shut down a number of drug labs. At the same time, it's not hard to produce fentanyl, so they're moving to other locations here. They know that Americans have an appetite for the drug. It's easy to synthesize. It means it's not disappearing anytime soon, even if there's some temporary issues related to all of this. Also, separately, the cartels here are going to ratchet up their own defenses and their own military equipment. In interviews, the New York Times was able to get inside some of the cartels. Operatives said they're importing scanners to detect drones, hiring more people, tracking aircraft. So ultimately, the cartels here are ready to ratchet up their military gear and experience to fight the U.S. military, taking things potentially to a new level in Mexico.
So, Moshe, what is your over-under on these 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico? Do they ever, at this point, take effect?
Well, they technically are in effect for like 50%
Some
of goods.
stuff.
Yeah. They went into effect. All of them went into effect on Tuesday. Now we're down to half of the goods that come across are still in effect. Over time, will they, go lower potentially? The thing that we have to keep in mind here, and by the way, we're forgetting the China tariffs. China has said this week they're ready for any type of war, including trade war, and they've ratcheted things up with counter tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, of which we sell billions of dollars of agriculture, soybeans, a whole bunch of stuff to the Chinese. And that has now meant that the U.S. government, to make up for the tariff issue, is going to have to spend tens of billions of dollars giving that to U.S. farmers to make up for the Chinese market. So that all speaks to the fact that a lot of Americans are going to feel the pinch here. We're hearing from them at Mo News. Some who have companies that import products from China, some who have companies that sell products to China, Canada, and Mexico. And in some cases, they've told me, I'm like, what do you say to the counter? Like, hey, if you have stuff to sell, why don't you buy in America? And they're like, I wish Americans made what we have, or I wish Americans were able to turn around the quantity of what we're looking for. We just don't have the production and the factories, and we never quite will. We just don't have the population to be able to compete here. And there's a certain price, too, to compete with the Chinese and the Mexicans and the Canadians. No matter how much you want to say we want all production to move here, we're just not a manufacturing-based economy anymore. And so while we could bring some stuff here, and that certainly is going to happen, we told you earlier this week about the Honda plant, that Honda Vehicles, the Japanese company, is moving a facility from Mexico to Indiana in the coming years, partially as a response to this. So certainly, this will check some boxes for President Trump, bring some business back here to the U.S. over time. But it's not an overnight thing. It's not even a one-year thing. We're talking about a multi-year process. And again, you got to make sure you have the workers, you got to have the facilities, you got to have all of that. And small businesses in particular are going to feel the pinch here. And so to answer your previous question, is it just about the stock market? No, you're going to end up hearing from constituents, Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill are going to hear from people. And in particular, the Republican messages are going to resonate to the White House when they call the president and saying, listen, if you want to keep the House and the Senate in 2026, you got to turn these tariffs down.
Okay, another political story that we wanted to mention is this goodbye for the Department of Education, at least the federal Department of Ed. President Trump is expected to sign an executive order soon instructing the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, to begin dismantling the agency that she is in charge of running. The Education Department has thousands of employees and a roughly $240 billion annual budget. There are a bunch of reports that it was supposed to happen yesterday. The White House press secretary, though, say it is not happening, or at least did not happen yesterday. She called such reports fake news. However, it could happen in the near future. And this really shouldn't be too surprising. Trump has been calling for an end to the department for years, even saying that McMahon should put herself out of a job. He campaigned on dismantling the department, which was created in 1979 by an act of Congress. So long story short, it takes an official act of Congress to close the department.
Yes, technically. Though we're told, based on the reporting that's out there, that he doesn't mention Congress in his executive order trying to shut down the Department of Education. As far as congressional approval, while he has a slim majority in the House and he might be able to get it through a House, though he would need all Republicans effectively voting in unison, in the Senate, he would need a filibuster-proof supermajority. He would need 60 votes. There are only 53 Republicans in the Senate. Not even all of them support completely dismantling the Department of Education. Now, short of completely dismantling it, he does have the power to make a lot of changes, cutting staff, closing programs, rolling back protections for LGBTQ students, establishing a federal universal choice program, a whole variety of things short of closing the agency, but effectively gutting parts of the department. Now, anything related to the Department of Education, any of those moves I just mentioned, or trying to close it unilaterally without Congress, all going to face major lawsuits there. And because it was created by an act of Congress, you're going to need Congress to close it. But certainly this has been a priority for a number of Republicans over the last 40 years after Jimmy Carter created the department. In Trump's first term, he proposed merging the education and labor departments. They tried to do it, but Congress basically blocked them from doing it. So he's trying to figure out a new way to do it. But it's going to be difficult for him, to do an end around Congress. And we'll see what he'll be able to do sort of within the department in terms of cuts. And there's certainly some of the tests we're seeing as Elon Musk's Doge and the various secretaries cut jobs across the federal government in recent days. There have been reports of a number of cuts to Veterans Affairs, to the IRS, a number of government agencies on top of what we've already seen. As for what the Department of Education does, something to keep in mind is for kids across the country, most of the funding, the curricula, et cetera, is approved at a local and state level. What the federal Department of Education does, it oversees Title IX rules, which dictate how schools respond to sexual misconduct. It enforces Title VI violations, which prohibit discrimination based on race, color, national origin, in a variety of programs. And their biggest job is the $1.6 trillion in federal student loans. More than half of all undergraduates participate in it. Now, for those of you who ask, well, what would happen to that program? $1.6 trillion. Does it mean I don't have to pay my loans off? Oh, no. In all likelihood, that would move over to another department. I've seen reporting, Jill, that they would move the loan program to the Treasury Department, and they feel like that would work within Treasury, given what the Treasury Department does, having them oversee that. By the way, Education Department also oversees national achievement tests, funds low-income schools, collects data on enrollment, crime, staffing. The low-income programs are also, that's of particular concern to a number of communities. And so that's something we're watching as well. So officially, the White House said it's not going to happen now, but we do know that they're working on something and we'll continue to track it.
Time for the speed read from Politico. The House voted to formally censure Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, for disrupting President Trump's joint address to Congress on Tuesday. That split was 224 to 198. 10 Democrats voted alongside all Republicans on Thursday morning, including my representative, Tom Suozzi, who is part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Now, the Problem Solvers Caucus, in case you've never heard of it, is kind of like what it sounds like. It is a bunch of Congress members who consider themselves to be moderate, who really want to work with members across the aisle. Anyway, as part of the proceedings, Green was asked to stand in the well of the House chamber as Speaker Mike Johnson read the resolution, when dozens of Democrats surrounded Green singing, "We shall overcome," and resisting Johnson's calls to stop. The Speaker called for a recess. Republicans and Democrats continue to argue in the chamber during the break. Take a listen to a bit of Speaker Johnson and then the Democrats singing.
That Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
So that was a bit of the latest from the House yesterday. This has happened, just over about 30 times in the history of Congress. It's effectively a formal disapproval of a member, but otherwise means very little. It used to be used pretty rarely, but in this partisan era that we're in, you're seeing more and more attempts to censure. The next thing above that, frankly, there's nothing in between that and then completely kicking someone out of Congress. And that is super rare, but that's something we saw last time with George Santos.
Who also happens to have been my congressman.
Yeah, so you are very well represented in this story. Your former congressman who was kicked out, your current congressman, who one of the few Democrats who voted to censure his Democratic colleague here. As we reported Tuesday night, Green was escorted out of the House chamber after heckling the president. He refused to sit down. He was holding his cane, shaking his cane in the air. And while we have seen this a few times in the past, recently, Republicans Lauren Boebert, Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, shouting back at Biden and during his speeches in recent years, neither of them refused to sit back down when ordered to by the speakers then. And so they felt that this took things to a new level. And so that's why they kicked Green out. We should keep in mind Al Green. He filed impeachment proceedings against Trump the first term. He's also planning to do it this term. And while Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, had said, guys, please don't become the story. Let's just, let the president do his thing, then move to push back against it legislatively. Green was like, hell no, I'm gonna say my piece in front of the president.
Okay, now to a new poll from Gallup. Less than half, 46% of Americans expressed more sympathy for Israel in the Middle East conflict, which is the lowest level in 25 years. Meanwhile, Palestinian support is at a record high of 33%. The move mainly comes from a major shift that's been happening among Democrats polling in favor of the Palestinians. The survey was conducted in early February amidst the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The survey asked participants, in the Middle East situation, are your sympathies more with the Israelis or more with the Palestinians?
So the major divide here was partisan. Republicans overwhelmingly sympathize with Israel, 75% of Republicans, while Democrats express more sympathy for the Palestinians by nearly 3 times. 59% of Democrats sympathize with the Palestinians versus 21% of Democrats who sympathize with the Israelis. This move has been very interesting to watch among the Democrats because just a few years ago, a majority of Democrats, just like Republicans and independents, all sympathize with the Israelis. But there's been a major move among Democrats, particularly among younger Democrats under the age of 40. And so you have seen this move here over the course of the past couple of years, and even the last year in the aftermath of October 7th. So basically, if you're running the numbers here, 75% of Republicans are with the Israelis, 10% with the Palestinians, independents, 42% Israel, 34% Palestinian, and then the flip for the Democrats, 59% Palestinian, 21% Israelis. They were also asked, more than half of Americans say they are in favor of a 2-state solution, the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, though that is looking increasingly unlikely given the realities of the situation on the ground in the region in the aftermath of October 7th and the war there. For those of you who are asking, what about both? What if I sympathize with both or neither or don't know? That accounts for about 20% of Americans. 5% of Americans, 5% sympathize with both Israelis and Palestinians. Just about that number say I sympathize with neither of them. And then about 10% of Americans are like, leave me out of it. I don't care.
Please stop asking me about the Middle East.
Don't we have enough problems here?
Okay, an update now on the astronauts still stuck in space, although Moshe, they would say they're not stuck. They're happy to be there.
Jill, they went up for 10 days and they've been there for 10 months. How else do you want to refer to it? Yes, they have enjoyed what has been a very lengthy stay on the International Space Station.
From Bloomberg, NASA astronauts for months downplayed attempts by Elon Musk and President Trump to politicize their unexpectedly lengthy stay in orbit. I guess that's how you would describe it.
Yes.
We're not stuck. It's just an unexpectedly lengthy stay. American astronaut Butch Wilmore telling reporters this week from the International Space Station, the words they said, well, that's politics. I mean, that's part of life. From my standpoint, politics has not played into this at all. Wilmore and his crewmate, Sonny Williams, have been living on the International Space Station since June after arriving on a Boeing Starliner spacecraft, part of a roughly week-long test flight that was aiming to determine if the vehicle was safe to carry people to and from space. But after the Starliner suffered technical difficulties on the journey there, NASA declared that it was too risky to bring the astronauts home on the craft. They are set to return home on a SpaceX mission in March, meaning later this month. But by then, they will have spent about 10 months in space. Again, they were only supposed to be there for 10 days. Their extended stay has captured national attention and concern, including from Trump and Musk, who is the chief executive officer of SpaceX. Trump said President Biden had virtually abandoned the pair. Musk has repeatedly said that the astronauts had been left in space because of political reasons. He said he had offered to return the astronauts sooner, but a former NASA deputy administrator under Biden, Pam Melroy, said that top NASA officials never received such an offer from Musk.
Yeah, if you recall, they went up in that Boeing Starliner. It was a big deal. Boeing finally got people into space. But the Boeing Starliner had a bunch of issues, and then they had to try to fix those issues. And then they realized they couldn't fix those issues. So they returned the Boeing Starliner to Earth without any astronauts. And then they waited for a SpaceX mission, which came in the fall, but wasn't able to take back those astronauts. So it's not clear here exactly when this offer would have come. And, this case, this accusation that Biden rejected it because it was coming from Elon Musk. Nonetheless, Wilmore, the astronaut, says he believes the claim. He says he has no evidence to believe the claim. He has no information on it, but I believe that he would have made that offer. Nonetheless, Wilmore trying to be very vague here in support of everyone. The astronaut Wilmore saying, we support our nation, we support our nation's leaders, and we're thankful for them.
Now, please get us home.
Well, what's interesting is he says that they're liking it up there. That Williams and Wilmore, they got no concern. They've been enjoying this very lengthy, unexpected stay. What they do say, though, Wilmore at least was asked about the toll it's taking. He's honestly, it's a bigger issue for my family and friends down home, down on Earth, who don't know when we're coming back. And so he says it's been hardest for people on the ground. As we joked when the story first happened in June, July, August, September. I mean, we've been tracking, listeners of this podcast would know. Did they have plans? Were there family weddings? Were there events?
Did they have underwear?
No, first of all,
which they don't, by the way.
They have one pair, and then eventually, it gets so bad that you push it, you make it space trash. That's the way it works. There's no laundry in space, even though we're told that they're working on it. So, did they have July 4th plans? Did they have Labor Day plans? Did they have Thanksgiving plans? Christmas plans? I mean, we're now Valentine's Day has passed, right? They've missed nearly a full year of holidays. But they say again, they're enjoying it up there. And 10 days turn into 10 months, and keep them out of the politics. Just get them home safely.
Look, you're, for example, in Arizona right now, and you're working, and it's probably harder. Or you probably feel bad for Alex, who's home, holding down the fort with Olivia, making sure everything's okay. So I get where they're coming from. They're in space, right? This is something so few people get to do.
They're astronauts. This is their
they've
dream.
trained their whole life for this.
Yeah. And they were like, oh my God, I'm going to be there for 10 days. And they're like, oh my God, I've been here for 10 months. I mean, now they're breaking some records. I mean, people have been there. There are people who've been there longer, but still pretty incredible.
And yes, part of the reason we wanted to do the story was the politics of it are interesting, but it's also they're still there.
The human element. I'm looking forward to when they get back down and the interviews happen with their family and they can all talk about the experience. It's gonna be fascinating to hear about it.
From CNBC, some big changes are coming to professional women's tennis. The Women's Tennis Association and the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund have launched a new program to provide players with maternity and child planning benefits. Women's tennis is one of the last professional sports to provide these benefits, and players have been asking for it. As part of the program, eligible players will get up to 12 months of paid maternity leave. Players will also have access to grants to cover fertility, conception, and egg freezing treatments. The WTA says the new policy will benefit 320 eligible players.
Jill, this move by women's tennis now brings them in alignment with other women's sports. The WNBA's latest collective bargaining agreement with players guarantees women full pay during maternity leave. So does FIFA and the National Women's Soccer League as well, who recently expanded their maternity benefits.
And finally, from Time, as Americans prepare to spring forward on Sunday, some might be dreading the looming loss of an hour of sleep. In fact, over half of U.S. adults now oppose daylight saving time, according to a recent Gallup poll. And this reason might be backed by science. Experts say that the time change does more than just make the mornings a little bit tougher. It impacts our health. One sleep expert from UCLA says the spring time change leads to a society-wide sleep deprivation. While losing an hour of sleep might not sound like a major change, it has a big impact on our health, in large part because most Americans are already not getting enough sleep. This expert says many Americans are already chronically sleep deprived or suffering from sleep disorders. So the extra disruption just amplifies any of the symptoms that they're already dealing with.
Yeah, we're advocates here on the podcast, as are a number of people out there, that if we go to one time, it's standard time, the time we're currently in before we change. That while you're not going to get that extra hour of light in the summer, it won't mean crazy darkness till 9 a.m. in the winter. Nonetheless, we continue here in the United States to switch our clocks twice a year. And one of the issues here, the adverse health impacts, happens due to our circadian rhythm. The rhythm is our internal clock, and it's very tightly linked to the 24-hour day. Now, the move we make Saturday night, I guess early Sunday morning, means that our circadian rhythm is no longer aligned with the rising and setting of the sun, and that impacts our health. According to one expert, when we're on standard time, the daylight hours are more closely aligned with our circadian rhythm. So moving the clocks forward has been known to exacerbate symptoms of anxiety, depression, has been linked to an increase in heart attacks and strokes. So beware, folks, on that. It is also associated with more traffic accidents, absenteeism, tardiness in the coming days. So your employees or coworkers or boss may not be as productive as they typically are in the coming days as people get used to this. What do they recommend? Well, it's pretty late in the game here, but they recommend shifting your schedule up 15 minutes every day in the days leading up to the time change. So at least do that a bit tonight as you go to bed before you have to change the clock on Saturday night.
So just do a half hour.
Split the difference and do a half hour.
Okay, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, what are you watching?
Jill, there's been so much coverage of this. We're going to have to go check out With Love, Meghan on Netflix. It's Meghan Markle, or should I say Meghan Sussex's Meghan Sussex's new show. She's like part Martha Stewart, part Joanna Gaines. I've been seeing various clips out there. This is the thing about anything related to Meghan Markle / Meghan Sussex. And by the way, that's a clip from the show everyone's been looking at. Like, she declares to Mindy Kaling, like, my name is Meghan Sussex now. It's not Meghan Markle anymore.
Because Mindy Kaling calls her Meghan Markle, and she's like, actually.
Which feels like a setup, by the way. You watch that clip, and you're like, the producers definitely told Mindy Kaling to be like, call her Meghan Markle and like see her reaction.
But the thing is, everyone still calls Kate Middleton.
Right. So this is the thing.
Not a big deal.
Well, but the deal is this. If you come in and already not liking Meghan Markle / Meghan Sussex, you find every flaw in the show. If you come in liking Meghan, then you like the show and you give her the benefit of the doubt. So as somebody who I'm going to say, like, I'm relatively neutral on Meghan. And there's probably not many of us out there.
Oh, come on. Give us an opinion, Moshe. You have to stay neutral on politics, but
That's
just
true.
Tell us where you land on Meghan Markle.
She has some work to do, in my mind. I'll put it that way. So I'm going to see if she can convert me with the show or she reinforces certain opinions.
Okay.
Does that work?
Good. Yes, I'll take it.
All right. Jill, what are you going to watch?
Moshe, I watched Real Pain. It actually wasn't nominated for an Oscar for Best Picture. It was with Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. It was up for Best Screenplay. And I watched that, and it was great. It was really good. So I highly recommend. Moshe, what are you reading?
I'm reading an article in the Wall Street Journal. Jill, we've told you about Generation Beta. Like, we're done with Gen Alpha. Everyone born starting January 1st is now called Gen Beta. They say that the name needs some work. Beta is considered an insult, especially in Gen Alpha terminology. Sigma is a compliment. Beta is an insult. And so they're talking about like how maybe Gen Beta is not going to work for Gen Beta. We should note, for us millennials, the initial name we had was Gen Y because above us was Gen X. And eventually, we don't call ourselves Gen Y anymore. We call ourselves millennials. Now the Gen Zers, they kept Gen Z. So anyway, Gen Beta or Beta generation, working on a new name according to the Wall Street Journal. Jill, what are you reading?
I'm reading an article in the Washington Post. It is called History Will Remember COVID. Why can't we? The 5 years we can't remember in coronavirus, we have discovered a memory-resistant strain of pandemic. And it's true. Every once in a while, I'll see a picture of me or my daughter wearing a face mask in school. And I'm just like, what was going on? It feels like it almost never happened.
5 years, it's hard to realize that it's been that long.
It's like childbirth. We block it out in order to move on as a species.
I can't speak to delivering a child, Jill, but I'm going to take your word for it.
Or the early days of having a baby. Oh, it wasn't so bad as we were up for 24 hours.
Jill, what are you eating this weekend?
So I'm going to try this new place. It's called Mango Desserts. It's actually a chain. And everything, as the name implies, has mango in it. There's smoothies, there's desserts. And my whole family has been on a mango kick recently. So I think we're going to go and see what we can find. All right, tell us what's going on in Arizona. What are you eating there?
So I was here for a very brief period, but I was able to check out Virtu in Scottsdale. It's a great pizza place. There's actually a Virtu and there's a pizzeria Virtu, and I went to the pizza place and enjoyed it. Another place called F&B, like literally the letter F, letter N, letter B. Amazing restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. And then our favorite go-to dessert place here, Shakes and Cones. So those are my 3 recs. They'll be listed. And I think we're going to find a place on the website where we can start to put all of what we're eating, reading, and watching, Jill. There's been a request for that.
I think that's a great idea. In fact, I wanted to ask people for book recommendations, and I got so many, and everyone wanted me to share them. It was actually overwhelming. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to block out everyone's name. I didn't want to post it with the names, but I still have them, and I will share them, I promise. And that is it, Moshe, from another news-packed week here on the podcast. Thank you guys all for listening. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
And enjoy your weekend, even though it'll be an hour shorter than every other weekend you've ever had.
Except for this weekend last year.
Yes, except for this weekend last year. Jill, in the last year. It'll be your shortest weekend in a year.
That.
Yes. It'll be your shortest weekend in a year, but still enjoy it, folks.
It's the shortest weekend you are ever going to have.
For the next year.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.